Thank you for listening to Scandinavian Crimes Podcast. Be sure to check out the episode links and be part of our other social media platforms where you can leave a topic suggestion or even share some of your insights regarding the subject matter of the episode. We'll always do our best to provide a well-researched episode, but sometimes due to limited access, translation issues, and inconsistent evidence between multiple sources, there can be information that's lost. It is therefore good to do your own research and get a deeper understanding of a case of your own interest. So with that all said, let's start today's episode. Welcome to Scandinavian Crimes. My name is Delilah, and say hello to my lovely co-host, Devante, who is not here at the moment. It is only me today, so yeah. Today's episode will be a little different from our usual format. We thought it would be a great opportunity for you all to get a taste of our YouTube series called Evil Exposed. In this episode, we will feature the first episode of Evil Exposed to help promote our videos on YouTube. So for those who don't know what Evil Exposed is, Devante is the creator of the series, and it is only available on our YouTube channel. He dives deep into the psychological profiles of the criminals we talk about in our podcast, and offer a unique and insightful perspective on the cases. As always, don't forget to like, follow, and rate us on all our social media platforms. And if you have any cases you want us to cover or any updates you think we should discuss, feel free to message us and we will respond as soon as possible. So here's the first episode of the Evil Exposed, and I'll see you guys next week. Bye!
Welcome to Evil Exposed, the dark profiles of criminals. So forgive me if you see me looking up and down. There's some notes that I have for these episodes, so I'm not going to be able to make direct eye contact. But when I'm reading these notes, I want you guys to know that this is just information that I'm writing down because I want to make sure I cover certain points in these videos. So in these video segments, I talk about some of the evaluations of Scandinavian criminals, their psychological profiles. Now, if you don't know this, I usually, at least I'm expecting to do this video about 1 or 2 times a month, depending on the cases and if I feel like there's something to be told with these stories. And basically, this is a follow-up to a podcast that I do called Scandinavian Crimes. I do it with my co-host Delilah, and basically every Monday morning we drop episodes. For most of the year we have season breaks, but for most of the year we still drop episodes every Monday outside of like holiday breaks and stuff like that, so that way we can bring you criminal cases from the Scandinavian region of the world, whether it be Norway, Sweden, Finland, that whole area over there. We cover all of this. So without further ado, let's kind of just dive into this first episode of this. And this episode is about Arnfinn Nassett. Now, this was the second case we covered on the podcast, and this case is actually still very crazy. This is about a male Norwegian nurse who was a nursing home administrator. For those of you who don't know what that is, those are people who usually tend to go to homes and like take care of elderly people or sick people. And he was someone who was convicted in 1983 for the murder of 22 patients. His cases provided a chilling insight into like the psychology of a serial killer operating within a caregiver environment, which is pretty terrifying, especially for someone who's older, hearing or maybe even experiencing something like this, where you have someone who's in your home taking care of you. That can be very terrifying to hear. Oh yeah, there's somebody killing people who are elderly. But this is basically a comprehensive analysis of his psychological profile, some of which was officially stated, and some of the evaluations are basically official diagnosis. So without further ado, let's kind of just get into his background. Now, Arnfinn was born October 25th, 1936 in Norway. Details about his early life are not really that well known, but it seems like he had an unremarkable childhood, aka he's primarily just, a regular kid. He worked in a nursing home and later as an administrator of the nursing home. And then he was in a position that people trusted, and he was in a position of authority and responsible to care for many vulnerable people. Now, after some time working as a nurse, he was killing patients with medication. So some of the medication he was using was indeed prescribed to some of these patients, but his primary medication of use was a form of a muscle relaxant. After a few years, he was caught after, I think it was a family member of one of his victims caught on because the victim was still healthy for their age and shouldn't have died. And that's when kind of things started to get out of control. Basically, he got sloppy. And then after that whole situation, he ended up being arrested in 1981, convicted in 1983 for the murder of 22 patients, and sentenced to 21 years in prison. Now, the maximum penalty under Norwegian law at the time was the 21 years, so there was nothing else he can really, nothing more they could really do. Now, despite his initial confession to 27 murders, actually, so he got convicted 22 of the 27 he actually admitted to. Later, he retracted that, but also many people believed he killed upwards of maybe like 138 patients. And that's because he was in the healthcare profession for 20 years. This is 20 years of moving with impunity and being able to do his job. And you think it kind of makes sense that he, of course, would probably have killed more people. It's just there's no way for them to verify whether or not that was the case. So that's pretty much the background and personal history of Arnfinn Nassett. Now, here comes his psychological traits, and I'll go over each trait and kind of break down how I feel about them and also just what they mean and how they can feed into the overall picture of him being a killer. Now, the first trait is lack of empathy. Very obvious, Nessett displayed a profound lack of empathy for his victims. This is a common trait among psychopaths who are often unable to understand or share the feelings of others. We know this already. Pretty self-explanatory. I don't have to go through that. Manipulativeness is his ability to manipulate his position to trust and gain access and control over his victims. So once again, that's where that power dynamic comes in because he's a home nurse administrator. He had a position of trust and power. People did not second guess the things he was giving to those people, which is why he was able to get away with it for so long. And that's just unfortunate, but the reality sometimes of what's going on. Now, something that fed into his kind of motives and identity as a killer was he was very narcissistic. He was pretty much only concerned with himself, and even his motives were still surrounded by the foundation of himself. It was somehow just about him, his experience, his point of view. He did not connect and really consider anyone else's feelings in terms of what he was doing. Now, this is more speculatory, but this is more unofficial. Is he had this idea of grandiosity where basically he was the head of the nursing home. He developed this sense of being better than everybody else and believing he was above the law, especially for getting away, especially for him, getting away with it for such a long period of time. At some point, it got to his head. And his desire and need for control was also something that helped him kind of maintain this charade for such a long time. So he needed to control everything, everyone, and this sense of dominance in his environment, in the people within his environment. I don't know how true this is. This is just, like I said, once again, unofficial, but some people who knew who he was in passing, or maybe, knew him from a friend of a friend, something like that, they said he had a very dominant streak and he seemed like he was a little bit, can be a little bit overbearing. But that's more speculatory. That is not official fact. So that one I'm unsure about. So take that with a grain of salt. Now, this is the part that's very interesting. He has some sense of sadism. Now, for those of you who don't know, sadism is people who enjoy or take pleasure out of people's suffering. So when you watch, let's say, for example, Law and Order SVU, and it was like, oh, he's a sexual sadist. The idea is the person enjoys the torture of that person in a sexual manner. Like the terror that they brought to that person in a sexual manner, they enjoy it. So in this case, he has sadism of the suffering of, the people he did this to. And it's also a coincidence. No, sorry, not a coincidence. It's not a coincidence that he targeted older people. Now, they were already, let's be honest, on their way out. These are people who were in late 60s, 70s, 80s, even some of them probably in their 90s. They were already on their way out from the world. They had lived most of their lives and, something had happened, or maybe they weren't healthy enough, something going on. This is back in the 80s. So, 60s, 70s, 80s, all that time he did everything. So obviously people weren't living as long compared to like now when medicine has allowed people to live longer. He picked these people because it was almost like a God complex. He enjoyed having power over a group of people who were expected to die. And it was almost like, I'm allowing you to live, I'm giving you permission to live. And that was a part of his psychosis, him having this God complex and the sadism of the experience and, feeling like he has control over these people's lives. This was something that really, really was like his bread and butter. This was the driving motivation behind this. Now, what's interesting as well is that oftentimes these, diagnoses have behavioral patterns that feed into it. So on top of the God complex, he was good at compartmentalizing his professional role as a caregiver and his role as a killer, which allowed him to remain kind of keeping these lives separate, which is why so many people didn't even know he was up to this. And he used his ability of medical, prescriptions and medication to do the things that he did, and once again keeping his life separate from his day-to-day life when he's not on the job, and when he's on the job he's like a completely different person. Now, of course, self-explanatory, these events, like I explained, happen over the course of time. So that explains that he's a very patient and meticulous, and he was actually described as pretty intelligent. So not all people who are, let's say, psychopaths or sociopaths are necessarily deemed intelligent because of their lack of empathy or maybe lack of ability to express or feel certain emotions, but he was actually very intelligent. And that's kind of what makes it scary, because once again, the compartmentalizing with the intelligence kind of makes this kind of a scary thing to deal with, especially if you're an elderly person who's in a home. And even as a person myself, I'm 30, to think that it's still possible someone might try and do this to me. So crazy. Now, he justified his actions, once again, having a God complex. He felt like he was doing them a favor, felt like, hey, he allowed these people to live, based on, what he felt, or maybe he decided to kill them because maybe, he just decided to, because that was his act of will, the will of God in a sense. And that was his rationale. He thought he was in the right, and he thought there was nothing wrong, which is why he kept doing it in reality. But also, part of me doesn't believe that, because when you think about it, he still did it in secret. It's not like he told people, hey, I'm doing this because I feel like it's right. So there is a sense of understanding of right and wrong. But on the other hand, there still can be one of these things where he knows society deems it wrong, but he himself may feel like it's fundamentally right. So who knows? But that feeds into my final point about this. He definitely minimized the situation. He downplayed it, and the severity of his actions, he just didn't see it as significant, which means it still didn't exist outside of his perspective. He still felt the need to be like, okay, well, even though I'm allowing people to either live or die, I'm giving them that choice. It didn't matter. It was like as if, that expression, little kid stepping on ants. That's how he felt about the situation. And that's kind of what makes this kind of scary. Human life, all life is important in reality. Everything in ecosystem, all life is important. We would be nothing without, the germs, the bacteria. We wouldn't be anything without the bugs. The bugs, feed the birds feed larger prey, and those prey feed a larger prey, and so on and so forth. The food chain, where all life is important, and anything that goes unchecked is not within the realm of balance. So, but in his head, he felt like it was nothing. Human life was nothing. The lives he took wasn't a big deal. And that's pretty terrifying. The fact that someone can work in a profession like that where their job is to care, but then not care. But then not only not care, see you less than. So that's terrifying. So to kind of make this a lot more simple and kind of wrap this in a nice tight bow, Arnfinn Nassett's psychology profile is characterized by a mix of psychopathy, narcissism, and sadism, a combined and kind of put with icing with a manipulative and controlling nature. his ability to compartmentalize his actions and maintain a facade of professionalism allowed him to evade detection for such an extended period of time. His case underscores the importance of vigilance and oversight in caregiving professions to prevent similar tragedies. And unfortunately, this will not be the last time. There's another case that I'm pretty sure some of you may know, but I'm not going to spoil it because I'm pretty sure at some point I'm going to cover it in video form on this channel in the future. So this is not the last time. In general, be vigilant. And what I say on my podcast, especially ladies, fight. If you're ever in a situation, I pray that you're never in a situation. If you are, though, fight, fight, fight. Pay attention. Be aware of your surroundings. This applies to everyone, but like I said, specifically ladies, pay attention. It's a crazy world we live in. And even though technology and medication and all that stuff has improved that allows us to live longer, in some ways, it's getting crazier. Peace out.